Mic check. All right, there we go. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining us today to get real-world insights and strategies on how AI is reshaping local news through the lens of technology partners with Microsoft. We've got advisory partners with Lenfest and publishers like the Philadelphia Inquirer and Chicago Public Media. We'll also be covering how important building trust and transparency is, both internally with your staff and externally with your readers and subscribers. I will be moderating today. My name is Evan Young. I'm the COO and co-founder of a company called Nota. We build B2B SaaS. We're a B2B SaaS AI startup that builds enterprise AI tools for assistive tools for journalists and digital publishers. We've got a suite of tools that help with everything from pre-publish optimization to post-publish amplification of that content across whatever platform and medium you'd like to create it in, driving efficiency, revenue, and engagement for our partners. So today, I'm joined by this amazing staff of folks. We've got Nikki Freeman, the Director of Strategic Partnerships in the Office of the CTO at Microsoft. We've got David Chivers, a lead advisor at the Lenfest Institute. Matt Boggie, the Chief Technology and Product Officer at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Melissa Bell, the CEO of Chicago Public Media. We will be saving some time at the end for questions, so please hold on to those for us. We'll try to keep about 10 minutes at the end for questions, but let's go ahead and jump right in. So I'll throw the first question over to you, Nikki. Can you tell me how Microsoft is thinking about how news organizations should and could leverage AI, and in what ways are you supporting them?
Yeah, thanks, Evan, and thanks everyone for joining us today. At Microsoft, we're focused on making reporters' lives easier, using AI for one, enhancing productivity, and two, helping the sustainable businesses of the organizations that they work for. On the productivity side, reporters have more responsibilities and less resources than ever before. They now have to create social media posts, newsletters, podcasts. So how can we give reporters time back? Well, most reporting requires research, and we've been successful at integrating LLMs into the research task workflow. For example, the archive retrieval tool that we built with Matt in the Philadelphia Inquirer, we've been able to save reporters almost a full day of work. So what would you do with an extra day in your week? That's pretty powerful stuff. Another thing that AI is really good at is processing vast amounts of data and finding anomalies and creating analysis. That's helpful to reporters. And I've been excited to see innovation in the space from Gannett and Hearst. They've been using this capability to create a real estate tool. It highlights transaction anomalies and outliers for the reporters to then follow up on and do investigations. So every reporter now has access to a data scientist. That's going to create wider and deeper coverage and more stories. On the business side, we think that AI can contribute to revenue and subscriber growth through personalization. We're also experimenting with dynamic user interfaces to increase engagement. And there's opportunities to create net new businesses from leveraging your revenue and your data and your archives in new ways. But these are the ways that we think AI can help, but we need to be connected to the industry to make sure that we're building solutions that truly matter to journalists. And to do that, we partner with innovative startups like Nota. We have feedback mechanisms with our large media customers like the BBC and CNN. They've recently just created a Journo Assist tool, which is an internal co-pilot for their reporters. And to make sure that small news organizations aren't left behind, we've partnered with David and the Lenfest Institute to provide AI talent, compute, and engineering support as 8 newsrooms locally in the US are building AI tools for the use cases that their newsrooms have identified as impactful to them. So I'm really excited for Matt to show you what they built here today. And most importantly, though, we're publicly sharing these solutions, so there's going to be available code repos and case studies, so every newsroom developer in the world can pick up these scenarios that have been tested, proven, and are working and truly changing organizations.
Nice, thanks, Nikki. So David, Nikki just mentioned the partnership that you all have with the Lenfest Institute. Can you highlight some ways that you've been working with local news organizations and tell me about some projects you're excited by?
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Yeah, at the Lenfest Institute, we approach this program, which Nikki talked about. It's the Lenfest AI Collaborative and Fellowship Program. We started having conversations well over a year ago with OpenAI and Microsoft, and the goal for us was pretty simple. We wanted to have ethical, transparent uses of AI across all facets of a news organization's business. So the program is basically, we have currently 5 that we've named grantees. We'll have some additional grantees that we'll be naming in the next week or two. 5 organizations like the Philadelphia Inquirer, like Chicago Public Media, that have fellows that are embedded in their organizations to work on these experiments. And as Nikki said, we're committed to publishing the code and publishing the learnings and best practices for the industry to be able to, as much as possible, lift and implement these solutions in their own news organizations. And so it was important for us to make sure that not only were we creating solutions that were easily understood by the industry at large and also by the audiences of our various grantee organizations, but we also wanted to create a community of practice so that these fellows could work together to solve problems that are unique for each of the organizations they're embedded in, but then additive to the whole cohort. So we're very excited about the progress we're seeing. Matt's going to talk a bit about what he's doing. There's really cool things happening with the Minnesota Star Tribune, which is another organization that's part of this group, the Seattle Times, who's also not here today, and looking forward to seeing what that experimentation looks like over the course of the coming months.
Thanks, David. So sounds like we've teed you up quite nicely. Matt, tell us what you've been up to, man.
Yeah, I'd love to. So naturally, you know, as David said, we started talking well over a year ago, and it was another year before that, really in January of 2023, when ChatGPT first sort of sprung onto the scene. And I think up until that point, we had been working with AI technologies, as many of your newsrooms have been, with some much more simple rudimentary applications, things like grammar checkers or spell checkers, some of those very basic things that we're all kind of used to. But generative AI definitely caused us to wake up a little bit. This is a new thing. It is creating information, or at least seems to be creating information in a way that directly challenges what we do every day. On the other hand, it does seem like there are some really interesting applications that we can apply to some of those use cases that our newsroom has, that we don't necessarily have to take the framing of the solution as it was given, but instead we can look at how we can apply it internally to some of the problems that we have. And so at the Philadelphia Inquirer, we have been continuously publishing for over 195 years for some various naming and consolidation reasons. That's sort of when we begin our history, even though you can trace that history well back before the revolution. Within that coverage, we have some real gems, including some firsthand accounts of the American Civil War. There's a lot of really valuable information in our archive, and if you've worked with a newspaper before, you know that in addition to just the vast amounts of history, you also have to get through the workflow and the systems in order to really access somebody's archive. In our case, we've gone through 3 or 4 different content management systems over the last 20 years, and before that, we have different relationships with libraries and other commercial applications to sell our data to other people. So being able to actually tap into that archive and find some of the value in there was a major issue for us. So once we started to look at the technology, we realized this was something that we could use to retrieve information in a very quick way that allows our reporters to ask really open-ended English language questions and have a dialogue with this tool. It makes it much more efficient and accessible for us to retrieve that information from our archive. Now, right now, we're doing that on the inside. Now we're deploying these tools to our reporters so that they can see what comes back from these large language models, from these AI tools, and be able to vet the responses. It's important that we always have a human in the loop. We want to be sure that anything we publish can be traced back to someone making a conscious decision to put that in front of a user, and that's really where we've been focused on. So as has been mentioned, we started with this archive tool. We began with our most recent and best structured data out of our current content management system and began learning what we could do with it there. It is, as you heard here, powered by Azure Search and Azure OpenAI capabilities from Microsoft. We've also been working really closely with Microsoft's MyDOP team. This is their AI development accelerators. They've been helping us learn how to use some of these tools and providing some of the technical expertise that we needed to get going. And so really over the course of about 3 months, we've gotten now to a point where we have full archive access to everything from 1978 forward. And that includes now images related to those stories as well. We have some more work to do on the image side, but what we hope to be able to do is to access any of the assets that we have in our archive just by asking for the sort of thing that we're looking for. So you can imagine trying to illustrate a story saying, I could use a picture that would be something about nature or spring, and here's a bunch of grass pictures that have come back from various photo shoots that we've done in the past. And so finding ways to work with the computer as though it was an assistant is really what we're looking for here. The role that it plays in our newsroom is actually one that newsrooms had and was served by people for a long time, this idea of a librarian who would keep clipping files on famous people, on companies in the area, and was a research partner for any of the reporters doing work in that area. We want to replicate that informational retrieval with this kind of a system. One of the things that we had to do to make the system work, though, was really to get deep into how it thought. And so what we've developed here is a bit of an agentic workflow, where if you look through our code, we've actually got like 5 or 6 different agents or personas doing different roles in this process. I won't go into the detail of all of it, but one example that was really salient for us was being able to pull out a date inference in the question. For example, if a reporter was doing a study on something that occurred during the Reagan administration and asked that question that way, then we need our system to know that that administration began on January 20th, 1981 and ended January 20th, 1989, so that it knows what to look through. And so that was yet another sort of refinement that we made as we went through this process. And as you can see, there's a lot of sort of refinement of the query and pulling it apart into different pieces. We continue to get better at that as we try to separate out the factual from the sort of contextual of the search. And increasingly, that's been the really fun part, is understanding how to get a system to understand the difference between a fact and a belief. I'll go into that a bit more later, I'm sure. So finally, I just wanted to take you through a few of the lessons that we've learned here. I won't go through all of these. A couple that I want to point out here on the top, frequent user studies are super important. And it is not enough to be doing this at the end when you have something you want to put in front of someone and show them how it works. You really should be sitting down with your reporters and editors right at the beginning of the process, saying, what kinds of problems are you trying to solve? Walk me through your day-to-day, let me understand your workflow, because it's really going to be the union of the technologist who understands how the thing works and the person who is working on the front lines who has the issue, where they can come together and really solve a problem together. The other thing that I'll point out here, and it kind of gets to that sort of interpreting time and history point, is that at the current state of the art, these LLMs are not really good at understanding that facts evolve. We've had a few different cases as we've been testing these solutions where it will pull back information from seemingly contradictory stories. And really what that is that in 1 year, the condition was one thing, and the next year that condition changed. But understanding what the current status quo is frankly beyond the state of the current system if we give it too much information. So one of the things we're looking at now is how do we narrow that search field so that we know that we're only telling it relevant information that it can summarize for us. So increasingly, as you're working with these tools, I think you'll find that they're great at summarizing information. They're great at restating things in different ways, whether it be shortening it or lengthening it or translating it to another language. But to ask something like, who played third base for the 1968 Phillies, that is a fact. And it's much easier to go to a database or something else like that to look that up.
Thank you, Matt. And I know we'll dive into some of that here a bit in a minute, but I want to throw it over to Melissa. So, Melissa, I know you all are a bit earlier in your AI journey in terms of adopting and implementing. So where are you today, and what are you most excited about launching with Chicago Public Media?
We're so early that I have no slides to show. Also, I feel like I'm at like a sports panel, like where you guys are at the press conference. It's like very exciting to have these mics in front of me. So I've been with Chicago Public Media for 6 months. For those of you who are less familiar with it, it's the WBEZ public radio station that is part of NPR in Chicago. And 3 years ago, we bought the Chicago Sun-Times, a newspaper in Chicago. It was a little bit of an odd choice to choose a career thinking about a print paper and a radio station in this day and age. But it's a very exciting time because I believe that the brands have a lot of trust, respect, and admiration in the city, and trying to find ways to innovate on those brands is a really exciting challenge. And of course, one of the first things, actually I think it was the first decision I made was to greenlight our application for an AI fellow as part of this Lenfest program. And the reason for that is because there's an exciting opportunity with AI. There's also challenges and a lot of work ahead, and we're already behind. I'm so jealous of the work that folks are doing in this space, what the Philadelphia Inquirer is doing, what the Star Tribune is doing. And what is exciting, though, is that in opposition to a lot of times in the past where journalistic organizations have been much more closed to sharing and collaboration, this feels like a moment where there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of opportunity to find ways to work together. So we will learn because of the work that they're doing. We will have a faster path forward to where we go. So right now, we just kicked off our AI work. I literally had our team send out our AI policy yesterday, so I could claim that we'd at least made a step forward. And the good news is that, while it's met with some trepidation, overall people are excited about working with this. We're starting to look at 3 areas where we want to implement AI. We've talked a little bit about some of them. The user experience on our platforms, tools to help journalists. We've been thinking a lot about really thinking about data research and data sets. We have a great investigations team at Chicago Sun-Times, and they have a ton of ideas. And to do that data mining and the data research, to even see if it's a good idea to pursue, will take days and days and days. And now with AI tools, it can cut that time down to a few hours. So that's really exciting. And then the third area that we're looking at is AI experiences for our audiences independent of our reporting. At some point, we'd love to surface our archives in a similar way to our audience if they'd like to search through it. I also think that as Chicago Public Media, we have a responsibility to think about how to help empower the city and make tools that can help citizens be more effectively engaged. So that means that there's a ton of data on very small county websites or on city websites that were built in the 80s and haven't been updated since. And so how can we build tools that can connect that information? How do we even build something that's just as simple as connecting all of the art museums in Chicago, a town with incredible art, and surface some of that information to our audiences? So those are sort of the 3 areas that we're looking at, but we're just getting started, so check back in a few months.
All right. Well, I love to hear the passion and excitement. I'm glad y'all got your AI policy out. That's a big step for a lot of organizations. It's really setting that framework to ensure that everybody's on the same page as to the why you want to implement this type of technology and the how. But let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how important building trust is and how important transparency is as organizations adopt AI. One of the things that we do at Nota is keeping trust forefront with our publishing partners. And a few ways that we try to do this is, we're obviously building our tools and housing them in Microsoft's secure Azure tech stack, working with the Democracy Forward team, and really understanding and learning how we can support our partners through the lens of what they're hearing is important. And we really want to be sure we're clear on how we use our publishers' data. So we actually only train on publisher data that we get explicit rights and access to, and you can choose how much or how little data you allow us to train on. And I think that's pretty unique and specific to us as a partner. And finally, we do have an internal editorial leadership board. So we have folks who sit alongside our data scientists, review the outputs that our tools are creating, provide that refinement training, and push that data back into our model Polaris, which actually helps create really amazing outputs for our publishing partners, which is really driving a lot of engagement, page view increases, et cetera, because we have some best-in-class tools for journalistic use cases. And so I want to kind of throw it back over to Nikki and talk a little bit about how big tech has kind of been perceived in the past as it relates to working with publishers, and how you all are different and standing out in a way that you're really thinking about, trust and transparency in the way that Microsoft is approaching this space.
Yeah, great question, Evan. So Microsoft has been paying news organizations for over 20 years. We truly value this industry as a partner, and we want to continue to contribute to the financial ability of newspapers, and specifically local newspapers. And a successful model that we found for doing that has been partnering with journalism support organizations. We find that those groups are uniquely qualified to understand the challenges of an industry, and they also have a documented track record of driving innovation over time. So some great examples of that are our work with the Lenfest Institute. We're also working with the Thomson Reuters Foundation to drive AI adoption in South African newsrooms. So that's been really successful for us in terms of helping us scale our work with the industry versus one-on-one partnerships. In addition, we understand that security is of the utmost importance to journalists in this industry. Reporters need to be able to make sure that their data and their sources are protected and confidential. And Microsoft is a company that has differentiated itself in big tech as running on trust. So being on the cutting edge of AI, we have a responsibility and an opportunity to make sure that responsible AI, safety, security are all built into different layers of our AI products. But importantly, making sure that our customers have access to the same safety tooling as they build their own AI experiences. When we were working with the Philadelphia Inquirer and Matt, we were able to experiment with our REI API. We've built flexibility into our REI features. So, for example, you as journalists may need to access violent or politically charged information. But at the other end of the spectrum, the New York public school system, a different customer, needs to be able to set high thresholds to protect their children as they engage with AI. So we really strive to make sure that our AI products are able to cater to the needs and requirements of every organization. We also find it a strategic priority to protect the journalists themselves. So we provide cybersecurity training to journalists that work in hostile environments. We also have delete me licenses for reporters that are covering sensitive topics. It really shows that we're committed to working hand in hand with this industry to make sure that not only the businesses are safe, but the people are as well.
I love that. So let's throw it back over to you, David. How's Lenfest working with publishers on strategies to build trust in leveraging AI with their publishing partners?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing we're doing, again, is this AI collaborative and fellowship program, but we also have a number of communities of practice around particular topic areas. In the US, we touch somewhere between well over 1,000 news organizations, and we connect funders with reporters, news organizations, et cetera. So we have a lot of activity that goes on around that. I'd say in terms of AI, we're doing things like, and if you go to lenfestinstitute.org, we have a guide on if you don't have an AI policy yet, or you're thinking about revising your AI policy, check out our guide, which basically came out of the work of this group talking with each of the participants, understanding where they were. Melissa pointed out that they've just put out an AI policy. When we started this engagement, they were really just trying to figure out how they should go about it. So we think laying the right foundation is really important. We also will be doing other case studies. We have another one coming out next week that talks about the collaboration between Microsoft and the Philadelphia Inquirer on the first stage of the experimentation that you saw, where we're sharing some tips and tricks. And we also think it's extremely important to be transparent with your users about how you're using AI in journalism. So, clearly identifying what's been created with AI tools, what has been created by AI. And then arguably for organizations that are uncomfortable with working AI workflows within their editorial workflows. I'd say, first of all, try to get comfortable with it because the technology is here to stay, and we'll see it to continue to evolve. But we're doing a lot. Like the Seattle Times, for instance, is focused exclusively on advertising and how do they do things like scoring leads that come in with their advertising group. How do they create materials and responses for proposals just to try and streamline and speed up the process of their ad revenue generation activities.
Yeah, you make a great point in terms of the editorial side of the house. And one of the things that we see often is looking at how the conversations have evolved over the last year and a half, where initially when we came into the space, they're like, absolutely not, no way, AI is the devil. And now as they've seen the tools evolve and the way that we approach our tooling with everything being a suggestion that can be edited, human has to be in the loop. My other two co-founders come from the LA Times, so they know the space, and we've built tools specifically for this space. We've gotten a lot more reception, and that helps, break that trust barrier a little bit as well with our partners. But I want to throw this to you, Matt, because I think you're in a unique situation at the Philadelphia Inquirer, not only through the lens of, obviously you're a technologist and you love, new tech, but how have you evangelized AI both internally with your team and built trust that this is something they could use in-house, but also how are you building that trust with your readers and subscribers and making sure that they understand how you all are thinking about it?
It's a really good question. So far, what we've been doing is to be very clear when we're using AI, and at this moment, the answer is we're not with our readers. And that's for a number of reasons. Partly because, as you've said, we believe strongly that having a reporter and an editor in the loop is important for anything that we're publishing. We do have some capabilities within our marketing teams and our social teams to make summaries and other things like that, but even in those situations, we are having people review the output and make sure that it's appropriate for the audience that it's going to, so there's always that human making that decision. If and when we do get to that point, transparency will be critical, understanding what's behind a story, how the data was captured, and as much as we possibly can to be transparent with that data and the models behind it. We think open sourcing the code and the information behind the stories we're doing is just as important as the story itself in many of those cases. But finally, I think the biggest thing that we need to do is continue to listen to our users. So one of the reasons that we're deciding to focus internally is as we do user research and talk to people about what they value in our product, it's the human decision making that they continue to come back to. And this has been something that's been true really throughout my whole career. Every time we've done surveys about things like personalization, the pushback we always get is, all of my other feeds are personalized. What I need is tell me what is most important today. And I want to know that there's someone on the other end of that making that decision.
So you raise an interesting point that I just want to double click on. So I guess in terms of how you all think about where to draw the line with disclosure of AI, right? So if you're using a tool like Nota, for example, and we give you a headline suggestion, and there's options that the editor can obviously copy, edit, choose as is, or make it their own, and then you leverage that for an article. Do you feel like that kind of hits the line where, I guess I'm just curious to know, at what point do you think there needs to be a disclosure? Is it when it's totally automated, or if there's assistive tools that are used in the background? Because technically Grammarly is AI, right? So you're not going to disclose that you're using Grammarly with your readers. So I would love to get your take on kind of where you think that line is.
I mean, for us, that is the line that we've identified, that there are all sorts of tools that we have been using for a very long time to make suggestions about everything from spelling and grammar to related stories to images you might want to select. And at every stage, there's always been a person either agreeing or disagreeing with that suggestion. And frankly, we find these tools to be used in the same ways, that we can use them as suggestions and we can use that as a jumping off point, but we still need that creativity, that human creativity in the loop.
Nice. So let me throw it back over to you, Melissa. I know you are a little bit earlier in the journey, but how are you thinking about prepping your team for this transition to use AI internally at the organization?
Sure. A couple things. First, I think it actually started with the application itself. And I think, Nikki, you mentioned sort of the mistrust in big tech that is prevalent in our industry. And I've always felt that it's really important for journalistic organizations to recognize that it's a relationship built on business solutions emotions, not on friendship, not on the hope that they're going to be your savior, but actually, does this help our industry? And are they giving us support in terms of actual money to grow our business so that we can be self-sustaining? And so really helping our team understand that we're making a smart business decision going into this, not just saying, oh, here's another silver bullet that's going to save our industry. It really has to be seen as something that's helping us develop our future. So it started with that, just walking everyone through the deal. The second part of it is always, in my belief, to start small. I think it's really important to identify people in the newsroom that can be your ambassadors in the newsroom, and start projects with those people in a very small experimental way. So our first team that we worked with was part of our radio station, and we asked them what their most rote task was, the one task that they felt like they spend so much time doing, it doesn't really take a lot of brain power, but it's just, they have to get it done and it's completely annoying. And what they have to do is they have to measure out their script time. They have to make sure that they're getting their timing correct. So we built a very simple tool that allows them to run their script through an AI agent that allows them to map out how long their script will be and what they need to do to edit around that. Very simple, very straightforward, and they adore it. So that team now suddenly has been our biggest proponents in the newsroom. We then moved on to our team that does Spanish translations for us. They have to pull out manually the story, the English story in the CMS, put it into Google Docs, go through a whole translation process. Again, a process that takes them extra time every time they try to do this. So we don't translate as much. We have 2 Spanish translators on staff because we think it's a really important audience in Chicago, and yet they're so consumed with this like laborious task. We created a bot that allows them to automatically pull the articles out, translate the articles, and then they go through it and edit it. They're thrilled. So again, we have two more conversions in the newsroom. And really having the people who are using the tools speak for it rather than me as the evil CEO allows them to feel that trust and relationship that they need to have. The last thing that I'll say is, I think that with any new technology that comes up, there's always a learning curve, and it can be embarrassing to be behind on that learning curve. And so trying to just find very casual ways where people can play with the tools is very important. So one of the things that it's been special about this fellowship is that we also get ChatGPT licenses. We can help just sort of set up days where people can come and play with the tools, particularly some of our older journalists that are not as familiar with it. And as soon as they start to play around with it, they start to come up with their own ideas about how they can use it, their own creative use cases. And so that's been really helpful, is to just give people sort of a shame-free environment to test things out. We have a great AI fellow who's just really approachable and knows that a lot of the relationship is not just engineering, but building relationships. And that was sort of one of the ideas that he put forward, was just sort of this casual get to know AI. And then the last thing that we're doing is we actually created an AI oversight board amongst our team. So they are helping us set up the policy. It's the people across the organization really making sure that they feel that they're in control of helping us set the policy, how we use it, what are some of the use cases that we're putting forward. And helping steer this with us. So very collaborative, very open.
I love that. And let me stick with you, because I know everybody wants to come here and get a key golden nugget or a takeaway that they can take back to their respective organizations. So I'd just like to run through all the panelists before we open it up to Q&A and ask, if there's one piece of advice or one thing you really think you've seen a lot of success with, just how to think about leveraging AI or how to build trust, what would that be?
I started really playing with technology about 15 years ago, and one of the things that we were so passionate and excited about was disrupting the way the article form could be. And we sort of took the print article form and put it online and said, okay, we made digital. And I think that what we found over the last 15 years was how hard that was to do, to recreate how articles are presented and put forward, because it required so much manual feed, whether it was like structured data in articles or it was coming up with different systems that could appear on different multiple platforms. And I feel like finally, after 15 years of experimenting, we're at a place where these tools can help us really get creative with how we are delivering news and information to people, how we are connecting people to the information they truly need. And so I think my key takeaway is that there's a lot of excitement now. There's been some great ideas in our industry, and we haven't seen them all play out in the way that I think we hope to because of that manual work. And so I'd just say, embrace this is an opportunity, a moment of creativity, and I think that we can really build some fabulous tools and build them ourselves, not wait for other companies to build them for us.
Love it. I'll throw it over to you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. I could probably give you several here, but I'll follow on what Melissa was just saying and say that definitely experiment. And when you're experimenting, I would recommend thinking small. It is very easy when entering into this environment to be sort of intimidated by the volume of data and the volume of compute behind these different models, and to think we've got to start huge and we have to put everything into the system. That tends to be rather confusing to a lot of these large language models. And so if you can be very specific about what applications you're looking to apply this technology to, you'll often get much better results. So for example, one of the things that we'll be testing over the next few weeks with our food desk is augmenting some of our restaurant coverage. So for example, we already are able to do basic things like what cuisine, how expensive, where in the city is it located. But what we'd like to do is to be able to get some much more sort of user-centric data about these places. Is this somewhere that would be good to take a large group? Is this somewhere that would be good to take my parents when they come and visit from out of town? Would they be impressed by it? And what we can do is actually ask an LLM, based on the reviews that we have of this restaurant, do you think this would be a good place that I should do that? And we can ask it why it thinks that, bring that back to an editor, and if they agree on that, then it gets a check mark in our database, and we can move on from that point. So we're very quickly looking at ways that we can use this to build up additional data around the systems we already have.
Love it. So start small and then expand. All
Exactly.
right. I'll throw it over to you, David.
Thank you. I'd say, I'll keep it pretty brief. Play with the tools. Identify people within your organization that are excited to use it, and then create formats in which they can share their information. So one organization that I've worked with outside of this cohort, they basically put ChatGPT Enterprise in the hands of whoever wanted it within their organizations. And then they created a Slack channel that they titled AI Enthusiasts. And the idea was just a place for employees to share what they're trying, some news that they've seen. And what they've found by doing that, they've got broader adoption, and there are very frank discussions around resistance and fear around it. They've also discovered a whole bunch of use cases to solve problems within their business, and particularly outside of the news consumption or journalism of their business, by the fact that people are playing with the tools and they're starting to see ideas of how AI can help them do their jobs better.
I love it. And then Nikki, let me throw it over to you.
Yeah, my fellow panelists have made some really awesome points of culture change that you need to drive in your organization, experimentation. I'll start with maybe more of a boring one. Prepare your data to be leveraged by AI. So just modernize and unify your data estate. If there's information that you're going to want to get context from together, make sure that they're connected in the data source. So for example, pictures and captions. I'd also say another very practical one is to start reviewing your entitlements. A common use case of AI is to surface information that you have access to that you don't find as easily. So if employees in your organization have access to documents that they shouldn't, AI is going to highlight that. So for example, if you have an HR co-pilot that you're building, the employees that work inside HR should have different access to documents than the employees outside of HR. And then I also have to give a +1 to the experimentation. I think that's one of the really cool observations of the Lenfest work that we've been doing, is that what these newspapers applied to with their first use case in the applications, a lot of them have been able to accomplish that. And like Matt said, are moving on to new use cases and trying different things. So what we thought we were going to be accomplishing in 2 years is exponentially larger than that. So yeah, be ambitious.
Nice. I think the last one I'll say, as an AI vendor, I know that you all are probably getting approached all the time by startups like mine saying what they can do for you to help your organization. Just really stress test those organizations that are reaching out to you. Really try to uncover what models are they using, how are they leveraging your data, what are they going to do with it when they have it, and really make sure that you are partnering with an organization that truly cares about your success and wants to see you, survive and thrive, and that's exactly why we built this company. So I think our panelists have given, some really amazing thoughts and tips, and now we wanted to open it up for questions. We have somebody back here with the microphone.
Thank you so much. I think that was a very brilliant presentation. And just to start, my name is Sandra. I'm a journalist from Uganda and currently in the UK pursuing my master's. And I am doing my dissertation on AI-driven journalism and its impact on civic participation. But I also understand that lately, most of the conversations that we are seeing, even today, we didn't talk about the Global South. How does it really look like for media houses in the Global South to use tools like these in respect to the challenges they face already in terms of constraints, infrastructure, lack of training, and so forth and so forth. And I also wanted to understand, yesterday we were having a conversation on how we can deal with ethics, fake news, and the like. Is there a possibility to have a tool embedded, or do you foresee that happening, where there's a tool that allows someone to fact check even before they read, a post or a story from an AI-driven story? And eventually, I just want to get your perspective, the Global South, AI. Is that something that is going to work for us? We are used to having the Western-centered narratives telling our story, and we've complained for such a long time that we want the story to be different. Africa is not broke. Africa is not bad. We want a better story. But we see that even AI right now tells a different story. I've had a conversation with my classmates where we're saying, when you ask AI the most corrupt leaders in the world, it's going to point out only African leaders most of the times. But we also know on the other side, there are some corrupt leaders. So how is AI going to, further entrench this narrative that we so badly want to change? Thank you.
Anybody want to jump on that one? That was great. Oh, okay.
I can kick it off. Really great question. So you're asking about how can we make sure that AI is inclusive of the Global South. I think that this is incredibly important. It's not my area of focus at Microsoft, but I do work with people who are deeply entrenched in this area. And so it makes me very happy that we as a company are doing research in the Microsoft Research Department and at our Africa ADC. We also employ linguists and anthropologists to help make sure that the models that we are producing are counteracting the bias that you just referenced in the data, and to make sure that they're challenging the engineers and developers that are working on building these models in a different part of the globe than where they're being deployed. So that's something that's very important to us, is cultural context of the model that you're producing and where it's going to be deployed. So we're working very hard on it, and we've made a ton of progress. I think in terms of how it can be used in the Global South, I'm very optimistic. We've been making sure that these models are producing results that are as powerful as they are in English. Like, you should not be paying, in some cases, even more for models because of the way that the linguists break down into tokens for an inferior result. That's not okay. So we do a lot of work on our models to make sure that that's not the case. But I think the entire industry should be working on that as well.
David?
Yeah, I'll just add, part of the, one of the objectives that I think I talked about at the beginning, but put a finer point on, with the work we're doing at Lenfest, while we're focused on the US, we wanted to make sure that the learnings, the recipe books, the white paper, and the code could be shared with as many organizations as possible. So it's our hope that from this experimentation, smaller newsrooms and newsrooms in other locations can actually take the technology that we've built and implement it into their own workflows. So we're optimistic that that's going to happen. And partially, we started with large metro news organizations because we wanted to make sure all the tests we do have a scale of audience that's large, but with an eye for this idea that these things could be applied in much smaller news organizations.
Hi, I'm Ulrike Lange. I'm a German-American media innovation journalist. And I have a question concerning the other end of the spectrum, not the AI enthusiasts, but the laggards. And if there is a way to get them on board, other than just say you're fired after a certain point, are there processes or game structures or something, or maybe asking them, why would you not use this tool? What are the 3 things that really bug you about it? And then go back in the loop and make sure that these concerns are addressed. And I'm wondering if any of you have thought about this and are actively addressing this.
I'll start and then I'll throw it over to Matt. I think one of the ways that we've changed minds is just the UX and UI design of our tools. And so it makes it so simple to just really see, oh, this is just a suggestion. I can edit this suggestion. I can keep it or I can scrap it. I can regenerate it. I can create it in my own tone based on information that you provide to us. So really, I think there's a user design element to just making it feel easy and less worrisome from a customer perspective, which we've seen really help a lot with the adoption of tools from folks who initially were like, absolutely not, no way, don't even talk to us, to now that they can see it in practice, it just makes it very, very simple. And also building things directly into workflows. So no one wants to add friction to their day-to-day work process. They want it to be seamless. And so as much as we can kind of integrate with CMSs and work right there alongside of, our publishing partners, that's really helped out a lot with just in driving more adoption and stickiness within the organizations we partner with. Yeah. But I'll throw it over to you, Matt.
Thank you. No, I love that you asked this question. I had this conversation with my publisher just 2 days ago. I would actually break it into 3 groups. At the top, we have sort of the enthusiasts, as you said. These are the folks who within our newsrooms and within our companies have gone out and gotten their own subscriptions to ChatGPT or Gemini and are paying for them and are really integrating them into their everyday. We don't need to have a lot of conversations with them, but we do need to go and talk about what's working and what they're using it for and understand more about how we can learn from some of their expertise. In the middle, we have the majority of folks, I think, would be the people who are interested, but maybe too busy or haven't jumped on that bandwagon yet or do have concerns, to your point. That's where a lot of the user research comes in. We've done a lot of conversations with editors and with other leaders around our company to understand exactly what some of those objections are, and are deploying some of these tools internally so that we can allay some of those objections. So for example, when we release access to ChatGPT and other models, we're going to be doing that through a tool that allows us to monitor those queries to make sure that we're not accidentally releasing personally identifiable information. We're monitoring those queries to make sure that we're not accidentally releasing pre-publication content. And we're making sure that we can also take a look at those queries to understand what kinds of use cases people are bringing to this tool, so that if we have the ability to create something even more appropriate for that use, we can do that. So this gives us the ability to develop that product internally. And then lastly, those laggards that you talked about, this is actually where the culture of the newsroom helps us out a lot, because one thing that is really helping us here is that healthy competition within a newsroom. If someone else on your desk starts to use these tools and they're getting more stories done, or they're getting bigger placement on A1, or they're getting more traffic to their columns, that's the sort of thing that their colleagues are going to notice. And they're going to go ask, like, how did you do that? How do I learn how to do that? And so we have to show both the application of the product to the people who know how to work it, but then we also have to show the impact that will have on the audience to convince people that they need to get on board.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think that similar to what Melissa was saying in terms of finding that problem for them that you can help solve, that's something that's low risk, internal, not audience facing, I was speaking with a newsroom developer that had a reporter that was pretty wary about this tool. And for their beat, they had to listen to hours and hours of very inflammatory podcasts, and it was affecting their mental health. And so this developer built an AI tool for them that listened to these podcasts for them, surfaced for the relevant insights for them to follow up on and go deeper. And that reporter's eyes just like lit up. And then that reporter goes and tells someone else in the newsroom. And then that's how you can start to kind of get more people on board by finding those little issues to drive culture change, of how it can help them tangibly. And then the other thing I'd say that we've seen as well is starting in a different part of the business. So like David mentioned, the Seattle Times is starting with the advertising department. And for reporters to see that how AI can help their business, that lowers the barrier of entry for them as well.
All right, I think we are right at time. So thank you all for joining today. Contact info is up here if you want to reach out. Enjoy the rest of the conference.